Wars of the Roses, the latest daunting sonic experiment presented by the band Ulver here in the calendar year 2011. A new release for your ears, but also one for your minds, your emotions, your inner spirit. For this is an album where the band itself transitions not that much further from where they have come before. However, instead expand it to near epic levels. Of course, we're all very aware of Ulver's past. We're all aware of their studio albums, their albums that once, in which they tread on black metal planes and then transitioned into more experimental turf. We also know the EPs in which they have produced, and also know that they have produced soundtracks, cinemascopes or cinemascapes, landscapes, whichever you would like to say. We know that this is a band that is very proud of their art. They're very proud of the increase in their particular craft, becoming more and more abstract, but also more and more experimental. Wars of the Roses is definitely a bold statement of this particular manner. 7 tracks at 45 minutes. It's not necessarily a long release, but then again, this is a band that really hasn't had a long release of any sort of nature ever since the marriage between heaven and hell, which was of course all based upon the William Blake short story epic. Wars of the Roses is an album that is defined mainly by the experimental and very electronic nature, the very ambient nature of this rock. And this is something where the vocals that are both male and female, thanks to guests and of course the band themselves, are able to paint a very, very soft palette on, or a very soft picture or portrait on a listener's mentality. This is music that sometimes feels like it is free-flowing. It sometimes feels as though there's no real form or function to it. However, a second more careful and more dedicated listen actually reveals just how cerebral this album actually is. The very final track, track number 7, 14-minute long spoken word epic with a haunting soundtrack in the background, is perhaps the most delicate, not to mention most representative example of this. And that's mainly because it may seem that the music, the soundscape in the background is merely there just to perhaps add a little bit of music to the beautiful story that is being told. But it is then that you start to realize that each and every tone, each and every note, every single thing that is being done and portrayed in the background actually builds onto the story itself. It actually gives the story more meaning, more potency. It actually sticks with you. This is actually one of those songs where I get flashbacks to good old post-rock. One name that comes to mind is Godspeed You Black Emperor. This is almost like the demented Big Brother, the Shakespearean Big Brother. Almost as though the two were linked through some sort of very, very strange interdimensional and inter-century time warp. This album is going to be very, very misunderstood by many. This is going to be a record that is certainly not for everybody. And it's simply because the scope of Ulver's vision is to be experimental and to be just really as random, as strange, and as, I guess, inventive as humanly possible. They didn't exactly break too much new ground on this particular album as opposed to what they were able to accomplish on Shadow of the Sun. However, those accomplishments which they were able to improve upon, well, they improved upon them tenfold. I find that the sheer mass and the sheer risk of doing a song such as a 15-minute spoken word epic, which just seems like a poem or a short story, really speaks volumes for what this band is able to accomplish. And while this is something that we saw them able to do for an entire album with William Blake's The Marriage Between Heaven and Hell, it was something that they really hadn't experimented too much since then, with the lone exception of the song Christmas from Blood Side. I think that this is a record that, as I said, is not for everybody and will be misunderstood by most. It's something that, if you want to become a fan of experimental music, this is a pretty good place to start. It's not necessarily going to take you as metal, especially if you're a metal fan. If you're a metal fan, the name Ulver will be very familiar to you. However, this is certainly not metal. However, what this is the core ideal of heavy metal. And it's the fact that it is sonic expression that's not really understood by the mainstream. This is a beautiful work. This is a very, very delicate work, but it's also a very haunting and cerebral work. Ulver is always a band that's going to be able to touch base with you emotionally through their music. If the music is harsh, it's meant to convey a harsh emotion upon you. If the music is a little lighter, and trust me, that's a rarity, you do get that same feeling of kind of light. This kind of yin and yang of emotion is something that Ulver is exceptionally good at conveying and portraying. And that's what makes Wars of the Roses actually a more memorable album than many others may think. I'd have to give this album a solid 7.75 to 8 out of 10. This is a great sonic experiment, and it just follows the long line of Ulver experiments that just seem to be getting more and more avant-garde, abstract, and just strange. But in a way, each and every one of them capture their own subtle and subliminal beauty throughout the entire thing. Like always, I just can't wait for the next one, to see where they go next. Coverkillernation saying that beauty can sometimes be found in all things, even something that may seem brooding and haunting, something that may be laced with melancholy. Beauty doesn't always have to be found in something that's happy, something that is sparkling, something that is aglow with life, with all colors of the rainbow and indigo included. Instead, something can be found in a very desolate environment and perchance itself upon a beautiful, beautiful canvas. Take a look at all the works of Shakespeare. Check this album out.